Hello, Miss Hannon here, and today we're going to be talking all about osmosis. So we learned a little bit about osmosis when we talked about forms of passive transport across a cell membrane, but today we're going to go a little bit more in depth because it's a fairly complex process and there's a lot of new vocabulary words involved. Okay, so make sure you're taking notes. So osmosis, just to refresh your memory, again, you probably have this definition already, is the diffusion of water across a semi-permeable membrane. Okay, so remember, diffusion is when molecules are going from high concentration to low concentration, so they're spreading out. So it's a type of diffusion, but this time we're only talking about water. So water is moving from high concentration to low concentration of water. Okay, so where there's a lot of water to where there's less water. Water passes through a membrane protein called an aquaporin. So this is a type of facilitated diffusion. The water molecules are too big and they're polar, so they're not going to go right through the phospholipid bilayer. They need a special protein channel to pass through. So we can see here, and some of these images students struggle with. So let's look at this closely. So the pink liquid here is representing water. The purple molecules are some type of solute, so something that's dissolved in the water. So here we have more free pink space, which means water. So more water on this side, less water on this side, because there's more of the solute particles there. So the water is going to move from a high concentration of water across the membrane to the low concentration of water. So when you show this, in this type of image where you have a beaker with a membrane down the middle, you can see the water moved from the left side of the membrane to the right side. Okay, so we equaled out the concentration of water. So you can see there's more particles crowded here, less particles crowded here. When the water evened out, it helped to even out the balance of those dissolved particles that are in the water. So that's one way that we can show osmosis happening. Before we get too involved, let's go over some vocabulary words that are important to know. Solution is a solution is groups of molecules that are mixed together in a system. So sugar and water solution, right? When we're mixing things together in a liquid. A solution is made up of two things. So we've got a solute, which is the particle that's being dissolved. So usually the solid, which is sugar in this case, if we're talking about a sugar and water solution. The solute is sugar. The solvent is the substance that's doing the dissolving, so the liquid essentially. So in this case it would be water. So water is the solvent, solute is sugar, and we have a sugar-water solution. Okay, so 3 new words to make sure you write down. So here's a picture of what I was just talking about. So we've got the solvent, which is water. We're adding sugar to it, which is the solute. When we mix those things together, dissolve the sugar, it becomes a solution, a sugar and water solution. Okay, so with osmosis, the concentration of solutes present in a solution greatly affects how the water will move across the membrane. So oftentimes, like you saw in that first diagram, the water moves toward the area of more solute. So towards the area of higher solute concentration. So you can remember this by saying solutes suck. So solutes are going to suck up that water to wherever they are. So to even out the concentrations of water. So here we have the water molecules shown in blue on the left and right side of the membrane, and the sugar molecules are shown in pink. So we have a higher concentration of sugar on the right side, which means there's a lower concentration of water. So there's 2 ways to think about this. Higher concentration of water on the left, lower concentration of water on the right. Water moves from high to low water concentration. Another way you can think about this is that water moves toward the higher solute concentration. So where there's more solute, which is on the right side, there's more sugar here, the solutes suck, So they suck up the water. So the water is going to move to the right side of the membrane. And in this case, the membrane is not permeable to the solute. So the solute can't move, only the water can move to even out the concentrations. Kind of making sense? I know this is a tricky concept that a lot of students struggle with. Here's that image a little more blown up so you can see. So we've got high water concentration here, low water concentration here, and the water is moving to the right side of the membrane to even out the concentration of water and solutes. All right, so all living things are made of water, right? All living things contain water. And water is so small, there's so much of it in the cell, that the cell can't control its movement through the cell membrane. So solutes and the amount of water, the concentration of water in the environment can greatly affect living things, right? Have you ever sat in a bathtub or a pool for way too long and came out all pruny, right? That's an effect of osmosis. Have you forgot to water a plant and it gets all droopy, right? That's the effect of osmosis. Or maybe put salt or salad dressing on a salad and then maybe you put it back in the fridge, you didn't finish it, and the next day it's all wilted up because the solutes are sucking out the water from those lettuce leaves, okay? All right, so in order to figure out how the cell is going to react to the water, we need to, there's three important vocabulary words that we're going to go over. Hypotonic, hypertonic, and isotonic. These are three different types of solutions with different solute water concentrations. So depending on what type of solution the cell is in, is going to affect how the water moves. Either the water is going to go into the cell, out of the cell, or move equally in and out. So we're going to start with hypotonic solution. A hypotonic solution is a solution that has a lower concentration of solutes, higher concentration of water than inside the cell. Low solutes, high water. Okay, so if we think about this in a diagram, right, maybe we have 20% salt solution inside the cell, only 10% salt outside the cell. And if I'm giving you percents like this, assume that the only other thing in the solution is water. So if there's 10% salt, there's going to be 90% water outside the cell. If there's 20% salt inside the cell, there's going to be 80% water. Okay? So let's think. Where is there more salt? There is more salt inside the cell. Salt sucks. So the water is going to move into the cell. Okay, so that's going to cause the cell to swell up like a balloon. And it could potentially even pop. Okay, so as a result, water moves from the solution to inside the cell. So the cell swells and can potentially burst open if it's left in the solution for too long. Unless it's a plant cell with a hard cell wall that prevents that from happening. But animal cells can actually burst when this happens, so it can be dangerous. Okay? Another way to think of it as there's a higher water concentration outside the cell, lower water concentration inside the cell, so water is moving from a higher to a lower concentration of water. One last way I like to remember this, hypo sounds like hippo, right? And hippos are big and fat, so this makes the cell get big and fat like a hippo. Fun way to remember it. All right, next we have a hypertonic solution. Hypertonic, and if you think if someone's really hyper, right, they have a lot of energy, right? So this is when there's a lot of solutes in the solution. So a solution that has a higher concentration of solutes, a lower concentration of water than inside the cell. And again, when we're talking about these solutions, we're comparing the solution to the concentration of the solutes and water inside the cell. Okay, so it's hypertonic compared to the cell's internal environment. All right, so let's see what this looks like in a diagram. So we've got more solutes, in this case salt, outside the cell compared to inside, right? 20% is higher than 10%. Solutes suck, so the water's going to get sucked out of the cell and move into the solution. So the result, if you are a cell, is that water moves from inside the cell into the solution. So the cell will shrivel up. So if we're talking about a human cell, in this case this is a blood cell or any animal cell, it's going to shrink, right? And if a cell shrinks, do you think it's functioning properly? Probably not, right? If it's all shriveled up, it's not going to be functioning to full capacity. What this looks like with a plant cell is kind of cool. Since plants have those hard cell walls, which you can see here, this kind of rectangle shape here, all these little green dots are the chloroplasts inside the plant cell. When it shrivels up, the cell wall remains the same size. It's only the cell membrane and all the other particles of the cell that shrivel up, which is kind of cool, right? That cytoplasm is what's being removed from the cell. So that hard structure of the cell wall stays put, but the cell shrivels up. Kind of cool. And lastly, an isotonic solution is when our cells are the happiest. This is the concentration cells like to be in. So the concentration of solutes here is equal to the concentration of solutes inside the cell. So we've got 10% salt outside the cell, 10% salt inside the cell. Water can move equally in both directions, and this cell is happy. Okay, so this is what a healthy, happy red blood cell looks like. Result, water moves equally in both directions, cell remains the same size. Okay? Here's another nice little diagram, right? With a hypertonic solution, shrivels up. Isotonic, happy. Hypotonic, swells up. All right, now let's do some practice problems here. I'm going to put myself so you can see. Okay, so I want you to take a second, pause the video, and see if you can figure out what's going on here. What direction will water move? So we've got a higher concentration of solutes outside the cell compared to inside the cell. Solutes suck, right? So the water's going to get sucked out of the cell. How about here? We've got a higher concentration of solutes inside the cell, lower concentration outside. What direction will the molecules, the water move, right? If these are solutes, the solutes can't move. The water's going to move, right? So inside the cell has a high concentration of solutes. Outside the cell, a low concentration of water. Outside the cell has a lower concentration of solutes and a higher concentration of water compared to inside the cell. So water moves towards the solutes. So solutes suck, so this cell is going to swell up. How about this one? We've got equal concentration of solutes in and out of the cell. What's going to happen? Yeah, the water's going to move equally in both directions. This is a happy cell. Now let's do a little more in-depth problems. All right, Bill goes to the pet store, picks up a blue tang fish, a tropical saltwater fish for his daughter Melissa's birthday. He finds his large fish tank in his basement and fills it with water from the faucet, right? So not salt water. He scoops the fish out of the bag, places it in the tank. He feeds the fish. 5 days later at Melissa's birthday party, the new fish is found dead. What happened to the fish's cells? All right, so if we think, and let me show you a diagram here to walk you through this. And if you ever need to draw a diagram for word problems, I highly encourage it. It helps me very much. All right, so if this is a saltwater fish, it's in an isotonic solution when it's in salt water. So we have to think that there's probably a good concentration of salt inside that particular fish's cells. And if it's putting it in water straight from the faucet, is there salt that comes out of the faucet? No, right? So it's going to be in a fish tank with 100% water. Where is there more solutes? Inside the cell. So solutes suck water. So water is going to move inside the cell. Those fish's cells are all going to swell up like a balloon. And if it's a brain cell or a liver cell or a heart cell, not going to work very well. Could swell and burst. Poor fish could die. Sorry, fishing. All right, pause the video, read this, try one more quick practice problem. If you said hypertonic solution, you're correct.